Hey there, Darshan. It's legal Shark Week here in Pharmacy Land. I'm so excited to be here with you. This was a really interesting idea that you came up with. But a shout out to all of our listeners, shout out to the pharmacy community and the healthcare community. Darshan, kick this off. Let us know who is Darshan Kulkarni, just in case people don't know who this guy is.
Thank you so much for introducing me, Todd. First of all, I have to correct you. I was not the one who came up with this. Josh Perstani is the one who came up with it. He is awesome. He comes up with these brilliant ideas. My name is Darshan Kulkarni. I'm a pharmacist. I'm an attorney. I work with pharmacists. I have over 20 years of experience working in all kinds of pharmacy, whether it is as a retail pharmacist dispensing drugs to working as in hospitals, everything from like small rural hospitals all the way through like major hospitals in major cities. I've done all of those. Worked in community-based care, worked in long-term care, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I'm actually a food and drug lawyer, so I help fight issues of fraud and litigation issues and buying, selling pharmacy issues. So all kinds of stuff associated with pharmacists, all the different ways we get into trouble, and ideally all the different ways we avoid trouble. Mm-hmm. That's what I do. And I've worked with Todd. I've worked with Todd for decades at this point, Todd. We've been doing this in so many different ways. And I'm excited to be here sharing another moment with you. So that's important and that's critical. And I'm excited to be here. So thank you for enabling this.
Absolutely. Shout out to Josh Perstani. He was voted as 2023 one of pharmacy's most influential people. His support of our entire profession is just amazing. Today, we're talking about the sharks in the water of the pharmaceutical industry swimming around that we don't pay attention to because we're not lawyers. And the next thing you know, we get bit by something. So talk to us a little bit about, let's name like the top 3 that you and I can get into. But what are those like top 3 to 5 things that are happening in the pharmaceutical industry right now?
So what I want to start off with, Todd, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but were those actually dangerous sharks? Because I want to say those are like baby sharks that are in someone's pool.
These are the friendly sharks that if they hit you while you're walking in these beautiful waters, you'll probably just scare them away.
Yeah, we don't want the big mama coming after you, and that's what we're dealing with.
These are human resource issues swimming around.
Yes, those are the you swat them away, but you really don't want to be involved in that problem. Who is the big shark? Who's the megalodon, if you will, of sharks that are coming after you right now? You're seeing a lot of uptick around the DOJ and from the FDA and FTC. So if you are involved in telemedicine, expect a lot of sort of attention. If you are involved in billing, I've seen like an uptick in that space. If you're a marketer involved in marketing your pharmacy, expect an uptick. Compounding pharmacies getting a lot of attention. So those are sort of some of the big areas I've been pulled into, some of the big areas I think people really need to be more aware of. What about you, Todd? What have people been telling you? Have you seen anything pop up, or is everyone quiet?
No, I think that this is why I was kind of excited about this being here and you doing this. And that's because I know that there are pharmacies wanting to expand services, wanting to expand how they engage with patients. And the question always is, so what is the legalities around me doing that? For example, we know that the feds arrest an Adderall telehealth CEO under the Controlled Substances Act. And this is a major thing. And guess what? This scared a lot of our pharmacists who are, I call these pharmacies that are out there, the high-performing specialty, the high-performing long-term care community pharmacies. And this brought attention. So this is a great example.
And it's great you raised that one. To be fair, I haven't done too much research into the specific component of the Adderall part, but it does raise all new issues under the Controlled Substances Act. The big question I've been seeing are the rules around how these companies are marketing their products. So here's the general rule, right? The general rule is if you are a pharmaceutical company, you can only advertise your product for the most part for the indication it is approved for. And you can only approve it based on the evidence you've supplied to the FDA to demonstrate that it works for that specific indication. Here's the problem. You're seeing this in more and more cases involving pharmacies. What they'll do is they'll compound the medication. So they go, it's not FDA approved. You might have a situation where the product is compounded because there's a shortage or the like. And the idea is that we're meeting a need. And absolutely, you're meeting a need. But then you're seeing the ads. The ads are making promotional claims. The claims are things like, we are better than this. We are different than this. We are doing ABC. The thing is, you never got those claims approved. It was, and you're basically positioning yourself as a approved drug, and both the FDA is concerned, the DOJ is concerned, and you're starting to see exactly these types of problems. Congress has come out and they are targeting this space as well. So there has been the latest Medicare information that came out. They basically said that we want telehealth to continue. We aren't going back on telehealth. What we're concerned about is, number one, reimbursement rates, and number two, what is the actual cost and what are the actual claims being made? And FDA, we expect you to be responsible. And the FDA is going, well, we need a few more powers. However, is this governed by state boards of pharmacy because it's the practice of pharmacy? Or are these basically drug manufacturers who are making unapproved claims? And you're seeing pharmacies try to say we're neither one, or we're both, or we are whatever we want to be at that second. Unfortunately, you don't get to pick and choose. So yeah.
I'll tell you what, Bloomberg just published an hour ago on July 22nd. Unsafe Ozempic knockoffs are flooding the market, and the nails on the chalkboard sound for our compounding pharmacies who are doing things the right way can't stand these kinds of headlines, because it's the news and media that always is drawn, of course, to a lot of the negative because of clicks and what can come through. But for all honesty's sake, we want to keep the public safe. So if this stuff is out there, if there are knockoffs out there that's going to cause harm, then obviously we want to shout it at the rooftops. However, we don't want the FDA, we don't want public, we don't want the media in general to think that all compounding pharmacies, because it's not that way. It's probably 99% of the compounding pharmacies out there are probably doing things just all right, absolutely okay. It's these underliers. It's the people that are out there that are trying to cut corners. Talk to us about, I know you haven't read this because this just came out just an hour ago, but let's talk about this in concept.
Absolutely. So first of all, this is exactly what we're talking about. What does the word knockoff mean? There are there are 4 different ways Ozempic can be given to a person. So one way is it comes from the company that makes Ozempic. I forget, is it Lilly or is Novo? I forget which one it is.
I think it's I'm not sure.
I can't remember. One makes Wegovy and one makes Ozempic or whatever it is. So there are 2 different GLP-1s, both extremely successful. So that's one way, right? The second way, 503A pharmacies. This patient cannot tolerate a certain dye. It's made specifically for the patient. Great. That's your one method. 503Bs. You know what? This drug's on shortage. We need to give it to patients. It's not available. One might call the 503As and the 503Bs knockoffs. And that's technically a fair term to use, but it's still unfair because they're meeting a certain need. And Congress has specifically come out and said that's okay to do. And then you get the third one, which is, technically a fourth one, where companies are coming out and saying, we are just going to, I think it's called Ozempen, if you will. If you give me just 1 second, I can pull up an example of it. FDA just sent a warning letter to them. There was a warning letter on exactly this issue that I just created a newsletter. Well, follow me. I'll send it to you, Todd, so that you can put it into you can tag it appropriately. But that's exactly the other idea. Other companies in other countries, or usually not in the US, but other countries, or sometimes in the US as well, there's nothing that says otherwise, will make the product sort of brand it so that you remember that it's sort of like Ozempic, but it may not meet any of the FDA criteria. It's just straight up counterfeit. So that's your fourth method. It's very clear that the fourth method is out. That's not allowed to come in because it's an adulterated substance at that point. It's adulterated and misbranded. On the other hand, your 503As and your 503Bs can very easily fit into the appropriate criteria. However, if you're doing that, you have to be really, really, really careful. Because what do you have to do? You have to make sure that you're not making claims. You can't say it's safer than Ozempic. You cannot say it's better than Ozempic. You cannot come out and say, use it for weight loss, because your product was never approved for weight loss. Ozempic was approved for weight loss. You are a product that has been that's allowed to come in during this period of shortage. And then what you have is you technically, if you are going to advertise, which you shouldn't be advertising because there are all these rules, what you should be doing is you would have a what's called fair balance. Here are the risks that go along with it. And you'll see a lot of examples of only giving the benefits and not the risks. And that's raising all kinds of questions as well. So that's sort of the lay of the land, if you will. So what can you do if you are one of these telepharmacies, telehealth companies? You are allowed to make disease awareness claims. You are allowed to talk about the disease itself and educate. You are allowed to go talk to physicians and go, we have this type of product if that is something you're looking for. However, you cannot go out there as it stands right now. And again, we need to do a little bit of deeper research, but and it'd be a fact-by-fact specific inquiry, if you will. But to go out there and start making claims about an unapproved drug is begging for trouble right now.
All right. So I think of compounding pharmacies that are doing things the right way. They're following the guidelines. They're doing what but let's talk about advertising. So we know that there's a shortage. We know that we need compounding pharmacists to jump in, take care of their patients. So how do they properly get the message out to their community that this is available to the community?
And that's the point. You are 100% allowed to go talk to the community and say, we have this product available. I'd be careful about saying it's Ozempic because you might be inviting some copyright claims and trademark claims. You might also have a situation, again, hopefully, Todd, you're still here and you can still hear me. Until then, oh, you can? Okay, I saw the shark and I was a little worried there.
As soon as you started talking about this, I saw the scary shark in the water. So I wanted
there you go. There you go. Thank you. And that's the scary shark. The big drug companies that are waiting for you to make the mistake because they will sue you. There have been multiple instances of pharmacies being sued because they're sort of non-compliant overall. So keep that in mind. So it's not, you are allowed to make claims about the disease state. You are allowed to raise awareness about the disease state. You are allowed to raise awareness about compounding. You are allowed to raise awareness about how you should meet these metes and bounds. Doing more than that, making specific claims about your drug when it's not been approved by the FDA is begging for trouble right now. And actually, it's coming from the FDA and FTC. I should clarify that. It's not just the FDA, it's also the FTC.
So I'm a community pharmacy. I'm a compounding community pharmacy. I can say in a newspaper, I can say on social media, I could say, hey, looking to lose some weight, contact us today.
I'd be careful with that because you're now saying that your product helps you lose weight. You never evaluated whether your product helps you lose weight.
Okay.
What you can say is, are you looking for semaglutide? We compound semaglutide.
Okay.
That's what you can do. Correct. Okay.
Straight up, no claims, just straight up data information we have.
Exactly. So one of the other common mistakes you'll see is people will go, oh, semaglutide was approved for weight loss, so my product should be able to make the same claims. Does not work that way because semaglutide had to go through extensive testing to show that formulation was approved for weight loss. You're probably not using the same formulation for multiple reasons. Number one, you might have patent issues. Number two, you may not have the API. Number three, you haven't done the testing, etc. So you are going to have a hard time saying that my formulation of semaglutide meets those goals. So you have to be careful. And that's actually very similar to what the FDA has done, not just in the context of drugs, but also devices, where companies, 23andMe was an example of that, where they were saying, we have proof that certain types of testing was done. We are doing similar types of testing, so we should be able to make a claim that our testing is the same as that testing and demonstrates ABC. And the FDA did not stand for that. So be careful about the claims you're making.
All right, so let's talk about the loss for just a second, and that is just making pharmacists aware that this is bigger than they may realize. CBS News just reported on this, where they said why millions are trying alternatives to big pharma's weight loss drugs. And there's good to that and there's bad to that. The good is it's opening up opportunities for our community pharmacies to step in. Our community pharmacies really care about specifically their community. It's not like they're mailing out or anything like that. However, the con is that in of itself, the word con, and that is using information just to make money, and the next thing you know, someone gets hurt. So, so this is a good story. This story just came out from CBS News on the 20th of July, so it's very relevant, and it goes into a pharmacist named Mark Michael, who has lost 50 pounds over 12 years and months. He no longer has diabetes. He himself has gone through this. So it's really cool to have and if you're listening to the show, you don't have access to this, I'm going to put this in the show notes when we publish this episode of Legal Shark Week so that you can reference this. But this is a great example, Darshan.
See, but this is exactly my concern. So I don't know whether Mark paid for this or how this worked, but let's look at exactly this. He doesn't make the claim, but this article makes the claim that he lost 50 pounds by injecting himself with his compounded drug. That suggests that his compounded drug helps you lose 50 pounds. Also, he's basically making a claim that he no longer has diabetes.
Yeah.
Which is hugely problematic because Wegovy and Ozempic has never been approved for you not having diabetes anymore. And those are the types of concerns that you're going to have because people are making claims that are so far beyond what's been FDA approved. And now it's one thing if you are saying this to, your sister or your brother or your dad or something like that. But now if you are a pharmacist telling this to patients, you're advertising this. And people will depend on this and go, wait, I didn't get rid of my diabetes, but this thing cost me $300, $400, $500 a month. What's going on? Do they have a reasonable basis to expect that? I'd expect class action lawyers to eventually go after these companies. And that's problematic as well.
All right. So what are you thinking is another big shark to look out for in the realm of our current temperature of pharmacy? This guy's scary as hell. He's big on the screen. He looks like he could probably swallow me. What's another big one we should be on the lookout for?
Another big one that we want to start thinking about is, and I love how we did this, Todd. Like you and I have not planned this at all. We just jumped on together and said, let's see what happens. So I would love to have questions. I would love to have comments from anyone who's going, you know what? I want to talk to people. I've got Patty who's asking a question. Can they add the drug disclaimer and sell it? So I don't know if you saw that comment. You want to bring that up so that we can put that up front?
There.
Oh, yeah. Can they add the drug disclaimer and sell it? The drug disclaimer, or the fair balance, Patty, the part that you're talking about, is only for approved drugs. In these cases, compounded drugs are not approved. They are allowed to be sold in a very specific context. For example, in the case of shortages, or if it's custom made for a specific patient in light of their specific needs. The moment you go beyond that, you add the drug disclaimer, you're perpetrating to be a approved drug, which you wouldn't be. So that wouldn't quite work in the same way. And I think a lot of pharmacists, you can have reasonable dispute about this, and we might see with the Chevron decision whether that works out or not. But that's where we are right now. And I think going beyond that is inviting trouble. We should be careful about where we take that. Because what we're basically saying is that there's one set of rules for drug companies who spend millions and billions getting the drug to market. And if you don't take any of those steps, we'll let you get away with making better claims. That raises questions.
Yep. Thank you, Patty, for your question. That was excellent.
Absolutely.
Another thing, the purpose of pharmacy, the number one purpose is safety. Okay.
Yes.
This is interesting. This is a headline that just came out earlier this week. It says poison control is paying attention to compounded semaglutide, and here's why. Let's talk about that.
So It's exactly the same question, right? So I've compounded drugs. I actually took a course in Florida in 2008 on how to compound drugs specifically. And and there have been multiple things, multiple processes that have been included. I've compounded for decades, for over a decade after that. When I continued to work as a pharmacist in the hospital settings and non-hospital settings as well. But we've got Patty has a follow-up.
Let's bring it in. Patty, you're the best.
Can they? Oh, next one. Like local non-GMP cell therapies, is it all about getting caught before one stops those nefarious sellers? So right now, I don't think it is quite the same thing, because in the case of non-GMP cell therapies, it depends on what you specifically mean by that. But often it comes down to, are you even allowed to sell those products? In this specific instance, you are absolutely allowed to compound. That's not a problem. You're allowed to do it. It's recommended that you do it because patients need these drugs. I don't know if you can pull up something where it demonstrates how many shortages we have right now. Compounding pharmacies became a real big problem solver because we had so many drug shortages. Now, to say that we don't need them is really ignoring the reality of drug availability. So it's a different type of beast. Having said that, I would be surprised. There you go, 6 straight quarters of drug shortages. I'm surprised that it's only 6 straight quarters. I thought it'd be actually several more than that, because I remember this happening starting 2008 or so, may even be earlier. So it's maybe just the most recent ones.
Right.
But my point being, it continues to be a big problem, and compounding pharmacies meet our goals, meet our needs in these situations. So the question then becomes, who should be stopped and when? It's often a lack of education. It's a lack of training. It's often a lack of sort of having a clear understanding of compliance. I've literally, if you look at the book there, I wrote the chapter on drug advertising because of exactly these issues. There are constant rules coming out on what you can say, what you cannot say. Patty goes, I did a 5-year review of compounding pharmacies a few years ago. Very interesting topic. Very much so. I agree with you 100%. I wrote the chapter on compounding pharmacies as well in the same book. So believe me, I get it. I'm 100% with you. I wish I'd made money out of pointing out that book. I really don't. Feel free to buy it if you want to. It's just really expensive. Oh yeah, good point. Let's see which one. I think it's food. No, hold on. Pharmaceutical and medical device. Oh, this one. So whatever the latest version of this is, I've written like 4 editions after that as well. So whatever version they're on right now. So yeah, I think it's a really, really fascinating topic. I wrote, and I think you really want to dig in deep and sort of be aware of that. To your point, though, Todd, there are multiple issues. We talked a little bit about the advertising portion, which would be the misbranding portion, but there's a whole adulteration portion, which goes to how are the products made? Are they safe when they're taken? Are they in the right quantities when they're taken? And GMPs help a lot. So 503Bs are often a lot more dependable because simply there are just more controls in place. Having said that, 503Bs get knocked down all the time, and the FDA has, if you look at their warning letters and 483s, there are tons of them in there. I have it. I love it. I love that she has the book. That's awesome. You don't get to actually read people who've had the book. That's awesome. But anyway, so I am a strong advocate for being in a place where you are making the drug, following the rules, because what you don't want is the NECC tragedy. You don't want a situation where you're making products in an uncontrolled environment, and as a result of that uncontrolled environment, people get hurt. There are fewer of those. We've gotten a lot better at it. The state boards of pharmacy have gotten a lot better at it. The state boards of pharmacy, if you look at the FDA came out and said, we recognize that the state boards want us to train them more. We are looking into that as well. So keep track of that as well, because the FDA does want to train. They're just resource starved because there's so many things they can be doing. But I think this is one of those really important things they should be doing, training state boards and sort of making the rules more equal so that everyone knows what the moving parts are. You'll get California and Florida that are really, really specific, really, really have onerous conditions. You'll have some states that are not as onerous. Well, what are the base expectations we want? How do we make sure that our patients are safe and they're getting the drug that they thought that they're getting? And I think that's going to become more and more important. GLP-1s have done nothing but raise awareness of compounding pharmacies. But it's also created this cottage industry, this cottage industry of people coming in and saying, you know what, you don't need a doctor. We have one who's just going to write any prescription you want. Just come in. They're going to write for this prescription and we'll give you the drug. We want to avoid those. We want to be in a world where patients are getting the drugs that they need that are right for them. And compounding pharmacies, to the extent that there's a shortage, are meeting that needs. So that's what we want to look out for as we continue. You had asked me another question, Todd, by the way. So we talked a little bit about adulteration. We talked a little bit about misbranding. The other question that comes up is, again, I'm going to stick to the marketing theme for right now. Marketing fraud. And if you allow me, I can bring up some of these examples from the DOJ on pharmacy marketers being sued and settlements. Here. So this is July. Ooh, let me see if I can pull it up. Oops. I'm going to share my screen, Todd. Share screen. Not that one. That's the one. Can you see my screen?
Yep.
Okay. So Texas pharmacy marketer was sentenced to 2.5 years in prison in order to pay over $59 million in restitution for defrauding. So what was he doing? He was 43 years old, and he was creating and marketing expensive compounded medications that were supposed to be tailored. He would have standing orders. So that's one of the big things that DOJ and FDA look at. State boards of pharmacy look at. Are these compounding orders standardized? Because remember, if you're talking about a true 503A, and we're saying that this is for a unique condition, if you're standardizing, that becomes a harder pitch to make, because you're saying that everyone has this unique condition. Well, if that's true, is it really unique then?
Right.
And that becomes problematic. Originally prescribed by doctors to maximize insurance reimbursement, they would get doctors to write prescriptions by creating so-called investment opportunities, so that doctors who wrote prescriptions could profit from pharmacy operations. Now, this is known as a kickback. And you don't want to be in a situation where you can easily point to a kickback. So these investment opportunities were obviously problematic. Then, this is another kickback. Took doctors on expensive and lavish trips to Vegas, Mexico, and the Grand Caymans, amongst other places. So to conceal these referrals, the pharmacy paid Cockrell's wife as a sham employee. So which is obviously problematic. And he was convicted of one. Cockrell communicated with the pharmacy using her email address and received checks for the kickbacks in her name. And again, Cockrell was convicted of conspiracy, and he's basically sentenced for 2.5 years and paying $59 million. Jeez. So this is a real thing that's happening right now. You'd go, well, is this a one-off situation? So let's look up pharmacy marketing fraud. So again, this is July of 2024. Again, literally this month, healthcare fraud. And what did these guys do? Fraudulent prescriptions and not looking at eligibility for enrollment. Engaged in the unlicensed wholesale distribution of prescription drugs. So these are the types of issues I get involved with. I help sort of address. Patty goes, wow, sounds like the 90s. We haven't even touched the surface. The DOJ. Northeast Philadelphia pharmacies and their owners. Let's see what happened. Oh, here. To resolve fault. Again, these guys paid $3.5 million. And what did these guys do? Violated controlled substances by failing to maintain accurate records. Obviously, Patty goes, you should present at HCC. I would love to do that, Patty. Maintain accurate records, fail to separate pharmacy Schedule 2s. And as you guys know, for a lot of pharmacies, you're either required to separate your Schedule 2s, or in some cases, you are allowed to mix them up, but they have to be well mixed up. And then receiving Schedule 2s from another company, so that writes all kinds of problems. Pharmacies are entrusted with proper dispensation. Obviously, this was problematic. Here's this guy. Feb 2024, marketing again. Former Delaware Specialty Pharmacy Chief Marketing Officer agrees to 6-year exclusion. So what is an exclusion? So that means that you cannot be involved in any company that does any work with federal healthcare programs. And that's hugely problematic.
Mm-hmm.
She violated by paying kickbacks to patients and physicians and waiving copays. And you're going to see this waiving copay problem show up not just with the DOJ, but also when you're dealing with payers, so third-party payers, because this is something where I've been involved in situations like this, where the pharmacist goes, you know what? We were involved in this situation. We think that there was, I'm just trying to help my patients. Why is this a problem? And the problem is exactly this. The way the system is set up is that you want to make sure that people really want their drugs. Right now, if you don't have to pay for the drug, if you don't have to pay for a copay, people will often pick up drugs that they don't need. The copay serves as a bit of a deterrent. Not enough to make them not use the drug, but enough to make you go, do you really want the drug? Unfortunately, the prices of copays have gone significantly higher. That's problematic. But if you start waiving the copays, the DOJ and your payers will come after you. And this has happened. I've been in situations involving that. Congress included copay requirements to serve as a check on healthcare costs. Okay, so from August 2015 to May 2020, he served as chief marketing officer for biotech that offered drugs and infusion services and waived copays for Medicare and TRICARE patients. Obviously, let's be honest, Medicare and TRICARE patients need the help. They're often extremely poor. They're on a fixed income. They have to be careful. Yep. And yet, the fact is that you can't go around waiving their copays. So he solicited and accepted remuneration in exchange for numerous patients to biotech. He separately paid $480,000 based on his ability to pay. And biotech and his chief executive officer Chaitanya Gadde previously agreed to pay $20 million based on their ability to pay to resolve allegations. So recognize that not only are the owners going in, but the marketing officers are going down as well. And I can keep pulling up more because there are loads of these situations. This is, as you can tell, these are all within the last year.
Yep.
And it continues to be a problem. Here we go. Let's take 2022. 2 owners of New Jersey pharmaceutical marketing company admit role in $38 million compounding fraud.
Jeez.
Do you want me to keep going, or have I made the point here already, Todd?
Definitely made the point. I think within compounding, it's kind of a legal in and of itself. I think that there's much to be thought around a multitude of different things that could come from compounding specifically. I want to make an example of something closer to the community pharmacy realm, and that is patient privacy. So 2 days ago, a blog was released that said pharmacy customer claims a technician asked inappropriate questions while she was picking up her medicine. And then this is a quote from the patient. I had to deliver my diagnosis to a room of people. Like, hey, pharmacies out there, you as the pharmacist or the pharmacy owner may be very well aware of privacy information, but your technicians or other members of your team may not. And therefore, Darshan, talk to us about training and about insulating yourself from privacy issues that may come up.
Such a great question, Todd. Thank you for asking it. So again, from a privacy perspective, first of all, my experience when I went to pharmacy school, they didn't teach us that much about privacy. I knew that HIPAA existed at that point. I'm old. I'm ancient. I'm old. So HIPAA was just coming out. But HIPAA was like a big deal. And we were like, oh, it's not going to stick. It's stupid. Well, I'm glad it kind of took. It's important. So what the big question is, what is patient privacy? You've got to make sure, especially when patients are going to what's called a covered entity, which in this case might be a pharmacy, their health information needs to remain private. And they need to be reasonably, they need to expect that reasonably their information is not going to be shared. Now, is it wrong for the pharmacy technician to go, why do you need this medication? No, it's actually absolutely accurate to ask that question. However, what should have happened is the pharmacist should have taken her to the side, taken her to the consulting room, whatever you're going to do, and go, can we talk a little bit about your medications? Because I want to make sure this medication is right for you. That is absolutely the role of a pharmacist. We should absolutely be asking those questions. She continued to question me, that declared my diagnosis. I don't know why my nose is itching right now. But yeah, I had to declare my diagnosis to a room of patients. And that's the problem. The issue is not asking the question. It shouldn't have been done in that specific situation. I'm not sure that's how you should be handling it. At a more practical level, maybe handle it slightly separately. Go to a different room. Ask the patient, maybe sit down, take a moment. Let's be honest, pharmacists do not get time to sit down.
Yeah.
This might be that moment where you get to sit down and go, tell me about what's going on. And that's often wonderful. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
The pharmacist, depending on the knowledge of the patient, they may know this patient, they may know what they're on. Then there's the brand new patients that they're very concerned with.
Yes.
Double checking with them, pulling them aside is a big deal. Let's talk about your technicians, though. Maybe there should be a training handoff.
Absolutely.
Something that is more administrative and copay-ish versus discussing about the actual medication.
I think you're raising a very important point, which is, well, I spoke to the fact that it is important to know the diagnosis. You're asking the right question, though, Todd. Who should know the diagnosis? And the fact is that you're right. The pharmacist is the one who has to make the clinical decision. Technicians are great. Technicians are critical to the practice of pharmacy. However, in the end, technicians were not trained on exactly these questions. They don't carry the liability that we do. So if you are a pharmacist, you need to ask that question. Why is the technician asking that question? And I'll tell you exactly how it happens, because I can remember this when I was in that scenario. You're working on something, the patient comes, the technician's already waiting on him or her. There might be a little note saying, ask patient about medication or about indication. And instead of sort of going, hey, you know what, this patient is here, can we have a quick conversation? Instead, the technician just asked the question. That's probably what happened. No idea if those were the facts, but I've been in similar situations. In situations like that, take the patient aside, talk to them, see if that makes sense. I think if you do that, I think it leads to a better patient-centric conversation. And I think that's going to be better for you. And so from a privacy standpoint, do that. Now, some people will go, well, I don't really care. Why? And I've had these questions like, stop slowing me down. I'm here to just pick up a medication.
Yeah.
And the fact is, you're a pharmacist. You are not an ATM machine. Yep. You are there to answer questions, and you are there to ask questions. So just because a patient is there for that reason, do not become the McDonald's of pharmacy. Mm-hmm. And I'm not saying bad things about McDonald's. I want my McDonald's person to potentially go, do you have an allergy to my special sauce?
Yeah.
So we should have that conversation separately as well. But the idea is that I should know what's in the special sauce, and I should be aware of that. But in the context of health, I don't expect my patients to have that knowledge. So we can have a whole separate conversation on that as well. Patty has a question again, Todd. If you don't mind, I'd love your input on IDS saying they don't have to perform or demonstrate training in an early phase because of the licenses when all others have. I don't even know why. Yes, you absolutely do. I don't know why they'd say that they don't need to demonstrate training on an early phase protocol. It comes down to what you have to do in terms of training. The training, it has to be on the protocol and how you make the product. I'm not convinced that to say that I have training, I would say I need to document it anyways. I need to check it anyways. Just because you have training in compounding medications doesn't mean that you've compounded this specific one. So especially in the context of IDS pharmacies. So let me ask the question. Let me explain the question to those people who didn't understand what Patty just asked. If you've got, let's ask the question to other people, by the way. So if you disagree, you tell me why you disagree, because it's a reasonable question to ask, right? The question is, brand new drug, never been tested in humans. I'm giving it to you because it's a clinical trial. I give it to you as a pharmacist, and I go, can you show me that you know how to mix this thing? Can you tell me? Can you demonstrate to me that you know what you're doing? Totally reasonable response from a pharmacist standpoint. This is like the 900th one I made this week. So why do I need to demonstrate this to you? So that's what the pharmacist is thinking. Here's what the FDA is thinking. You've made 900 other medications where the formulation's been settled. We know what happens, blah, 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 blah. This is not one of those. This is the first time we're using this product. You tell me that you know how to make this specific one. Doesn't have to be elaborate. I just need to know that you know how to do it. Show me that training. Show me that you can follow the process we've identified, the protocol, if you will. I'm good to go on my way because I need to demonstrate that I did the training and move on. The fact is that pharmacists, again, I can say this as a pharmacist because I know I would probably be slightly offended if I was asked to do that question, because it makes me feel like you don't think I know how to freaking make a medication. I do, but that's not the reason they're asking you. They're asking you because the FDA has a very clear rule. The FDA's rule is if you didn't write it down, it did not happen. If you did not demonstrate that you can actually compound this medication, it did not happen. I don't care that he claims that he knows what he's doing. It's the same reason every doctor has to demonstrate what's called good clinical practice, GCP training. It's the same exact process. So hopefully, Patty, that answers your question. Going back to Todd, we were actually and sorry for the little adjustment there, guys, but we were addressing this question on how should pharmacies deal with the fact that patients want to just get the medication and move away, and how is that different from other scenarios? The scenario I would compare it to is, and this comes up often, what if you are in a situation where the pharmacy is like, I don't have to do I have to have the same controls if I'm putting in the information into a website? And why don't they have to have a separate, unique, blah, blah, blah? Because technically speaking, a website is not a covered entity unless it belongs, for example, to a pharmacy or the like. So be careful of that. It's not as simple. Rules change depending on context. Talk to a lawyer. Call me if you want. And Todd, if you can flash where they can reach me, that'd be great. But kulkarnilawfirm.com. Thank you. And that's how you will know what's right for you, what's right for your patients. So hopefully that answers some questions.
Absolutely. The sharks are still out there, and they're swimming around, and some of those sharks scare me. So there's going to be an example of a upcoming one that we're going to be talking about, which is kind of a curve. It's the curveball of today.
Okay, here we go.
So I'm going to get this one ready. All right. So I think of the ethical dilemmas that come into pharmacy because of what pharmacists do, the substances that they deal with. It's very interesting. So in this case, let's talk about palliative care for a second, which is, this kind of gets into some real deep weeds, but you handle the sharks, and that is the palliative cancer care often poses ethical dilemmas. This is written by Marcus Banks. We're pulling this from specialtypharmacycontinuum.com.
Okay.
Love these guys. They're always at the good specialty pharmacy conferences. I'll be at the NASP, by the way, National Association of Specialty Pharmacies, and Specialty Pharmacy Continuum shows up. But they write this article that says there's a patient that was in their end of life, and they made the comment to the pharmacist, they made the comment to the nurses that they're just too tired to move on. And there are all these situations and people, and the case for this gentleman, he's a 47-year-old that was dealing with colon cancer. But let's talk about, just in general, not necessarily this case, the ethical dilemmas and the cross between ethical dilemmas and legal dilemmas.
So I used to work at the Philadelphia College of Pharmacy, and I taught the course on law and ethics for medical writers in the biomedical writing program at PCPS before it got absorbed by St. Joe's. I want to say like 2 years ago. So I am very, very familiar with the ethical dilemmas that pharmacists often face. I tend to focus primarily on clinical research type issues, but in these specific instances, the question is, for example, if you scroll down there a little bit, she brings up the 4 elements, if you will. Keep scrolling. There you go. Oh no, there you go. Fundamental ethical principles. There are 4 fundamental ethical principles in the context of bioethics that are considered beneficence, which is it in the benefit of the patient? Autonomy, again, every person should have the right to decide for themselves what they're going to do. Justice, which is fair, equitable, and appropriate treatment, and non-maleficence, which is do no harm. So recognize that beneficence and non-maleficence are actually slightly complementary, but they're not the same thing. Non-maleficence is on you, which is do no harm to the patient, while beneficence is actually for the patient. Is it in their best interest? So let's take the scenario you described, where you said patient says that they want to take no more medications, they're tired. The question is, should the pharmacist continue to supply the medication in that scenario?
Yep.
Let's go back to the 4 questions that they brought up. Let's do analysis through those 4 questions. You want to bring those up again, Todd? Yeah. So is it for the benefit of the patient? If it is in this case, the answer is yes. The medication would possibly benefit the patient, but it violates autonomy. All people have the power to make rational choices and moral choices. Stage 4 cancer, they fought, they're tired. Now, do I get to come in and say, no, you need to keep fighting? Well, it's not my right. It's not my right to impose my values on someone else. From an autonomy perspective, I cannot choose to do that. So it's useful to start thinking about it from that perspective. Let's keep going just to see what happens with the other 2. Justice, is it fair, equitable, and appropriate? And this becomes a bigger and bigger issue. We've talked about drug shortages. What do you start doing when one patient can get the medication but another patient can't? How do you decide which patient gets their cancer medication? Those start becoming really, really hard questions, because how do you get to decide that? So let's address this specific one. Cancer patient, a little sick, very, very sick, doesn't want to keep going. Is it fair, equitable, and appropriate? Yeah, we're not saying that we're not going to give them the medication that they wanted. And do no harm. Now, this is slightly complicated, because if you say do no harm, define harm. Is harm about the person will die if you stop giving them medication? Or is harm connected to them going, I don't want to keep fighting? Me fighting is harm.
Mm-hmm.
And I default back to the autonomy question, or the autonomy criteria, and go, harm would probably be them specifically identifying that they don't want this. And if I continue to do it, it is not acting in non-maleficence. On the other hand, let's do a similar analysis just to sort of keep things interesting. Let's assume that we've got a cancer drug, it's on shortage. We've got 10 patients, we've got enough for 8. Which 2 don't get the drug? Let's start from the top. What are the 4? Beneficence. There's no question we're acting in the benefit of patients.
Yep.
I don't know if we can say it's acting in the benefit of the 2 patients who are not. But what we need to start considering is, are there some patients who are more likely than others to respond to another treatment?
Yep.
That might be helpful to start thinking through. Autonomy. All patients have the right to make their own rational decisions and moral choices. Maybe we talk to them. Some patients are, finishing up their therapy. They've lost their will to live. They don't want to go on. They might say, I'd rather someone else get this because I think they have a better chance. I've made peace with where I am. Give them that opportunity. Let's scroll down. Justice. Is it fair, equitable, and appropriate? Are we saying that we're not going to give it to a 50-year-old man, but we will give it to a 60-year-old woman? Are we saying that we won't give it to a black man, but we will give it to a white woman? Each of those would be unfair, inequitable, and inappropriate. So it has to be fair. And again, do no harm. You rejecting and you saying that I won't give the medication to certain patients would be doing harm. There have been situations, as you know, where you've got pharmacists who diluted their cancer drug just to give it to more people. That would fail the do no harm part of the test.
Right.
Oddly, it would succeed in the fair, equitable, and appropriate element of it, which is probably not where you want to be. But yes, and I think that's the problem, right? This idea that you don't want to keep doing harm. Did I pass the curveball that you threw out there, Todd?
You did. I tell you what, the cross of a lawyer and a pharmacist, it's a really necessary and needed combination for sure. I don't know. Over the years, shout out to Aaron Albert. Dr. Albert's a lawyer and a pharmacist and working for Mark Cuban right now, keeping probably him out of jail or something. But who knows? But I don't think we have enough pharmacists that are lawyers to tell you the truth. I think that is an interesting balance. And I think that it's going to be an avenue that's going to increase, especially with precision medicine becoming bigger, pharmacogenomics, when it finally gets accepted. This is just me, the layperson, saying this. When pharmacogenomics goes full blast, I think there's going to be a lot of legal things percolating because of, did the pharma company know that 60% of the people that it went to are never going to metabolize that medication correctly? Therefore, this test that is, showing us that, Darshan, you metabolize it very quickly. Todd, you metabolize it super fast, so we can give it to you. Like that in of itself is going to be a future of law in pharmacy, and I think a whole nother Shark Week for sure.
So we definitely need to do that in the next Shark Week. But let me ask you a question to keep thinking about that question. The test that you used to demonstrate that Darshan's a fast metabolizer, was that test ever FDA approved?
Ooh, right. It has to be, right?
It has to be, and that's called a lab developed test. And the FDA has all new rules on lab developed tests, and whether you can make those claims or even make the test without getting FDA approval. And that's going to cause all kinds of problems in pharmacogenomics. And that's actually, we might see some challenges around Chevron with it, but expect some big changes to the pharmacogenomics industry as we continue.
Well, on that note, there was an article that was written out on National Library of Medicine, PubMed, that says ethical and public policy challenges for pharmacogenomics, written by Dr. Elliot Gershon, who writes a lot for PubMed. But I would love to dig into this with our pharmacogenomics experts, Dr. Becky Winslow and Dr. Benaz Sarami, just from their understanding of it. But the legal side of it, Darshan, is what I'm really interested in as well.
Yeah. So let's sort of explore what's going on in the pharmacogenomics world. So let me see if I can pull it up.
And if you're watching, if you're listening, and you want to ask a question quickly, because we only have about 7.
Patty has another question. Why don't we ask that question?
There we go.
Okay, how about post-approval drug questionnaires that no one wants to touch? Who is paying and what is my risk, says the HC. I don't think I fully follow. Post-approval drug questionnaires. Who is paying and what is my risk, says the HCP. Insurance and manufacturer want and need the answer. No stick. Are you talking in the context of a clinical trial, Patty? Tell me more about the context.
Yeah, clinical trials is another sector that we could dig into for sure.
Well, we should have a whole conversation on clinical trials, Todd, whenever you want. We should do this more often. We should have like a standing monthly thing we should aim for. That'd be a lot of fun.
I want to give a shout out to the companies watching, or the directors of marketing, for example. If you have a question, please reach out to kulkarnilawfirm.com.
Thank you.
Schedule time with Darshan, because he really is a GPS of all things navigating pharmaceutical, pharmacy, and law. So it's the guy to go to. If I owned a pharmaceutical company, I would retain Darshan for sure.
Oh, that's very, very kind. And thank you so much. And just to be clear, I have a tremendous amount of respect for Todd and the behemoth that he has built through the Pharmacy Podcast Network. And people come to him, for advice, people come to him because he's a great guide, he's a great connector. So for those people who are going, I don't know how to penetrate the pharmacy industry, you need to talk to Todd because he will tell you the right people to talk to, when to talk to them, and what makes sense, and potentially how to reach them. And I think the Pharmacy Podcast Network is a great way to do that. Todd, what is the reach of the Pharmacy Podcast Network now?
We bounce between 60 and 100,000 listeners, depending on what the topics are for that month. We're putting out between 4 and 5, sometimes 6 episodes per week. And we are working with 52 different pharmacists right now. And we're now an international publication with organizations like the FIP, the Federation of International Pharmacists, as well as our London cohort, Dr. Anisha Patel with Pharmacist Diaries, and Pharma Excel with our New Zealand contact, Katrina Azur. She's amazing. So the expansion of this network is it's just on fire, and it's so much fun to have organizations and people like you that have been a part of it for a very long time. Patty did send us one last message.
Yeah. So, she also already has one more thing that's going in. Insurance sees the patient is in the hospital and wants to know if the new drug they're covering for the patient caused the hospitalization. Who should? And I think the next question is, in that scenario, should we be looking at who is paying for it and what is my risk as the HCP? You'd go 4 up, Todd, for the question. That I think the two things were connected there. So I think, again, if I was a healthcare provider, I think I'd ask the exact same questions. Why would I answer that question? I'm sticking my neck out for what purpose? And I'd want to look at the contract. Does my insurance contract require me to answer that question? I would be a betting person to say possibly not, because otherwise more people would answer that question. But I wouldn't be eager to answer a question I'm not being paid for that may potentially say that there's an adverse reaction to a drug, and it's asking me to establish causation. One of the key pieces, as Patty knows, you can't use, it's very, very unusual to use one data point to establish causation. Great point, Patty. I'm going to get to the real world use. It's very difficult to use one data point to establish causation. So if an insurance comes out and says, did paying for this drug cause this hospitalization, they're effectively putting themselves in the FDA's position or in CMS's position and saying, we're going to decide whether we pay for drugs based on pharmacovigilance, but the pharmacovigilance itself is kind of shady, if you will. Mm-hmm. And that raises all kinds of problems. So I'm not sure I would be eager to answer those questions. Now, the point Patty raises, if you could go to the last one that she puts out, she goes, FDA is looking for post-approval data on real use. So technically speaking, most, I know as a pharmacist I've done this, I know doctors have done this as well. Patty, I'm sure you've done this as an RN yourself. We do fill out information when we see things that we think may be causative, but we don't claim that it is causative. We say that we saw an adverse reaction, we had these drugs going on, and here's something you guys should explore. You get enough data points, you've got a signal, and you've got a trend. But without that, I don't think people should be using a single data point to show causation. So your point's well made. Pharmacists are very, very well placed to answer that question. But maybe the question becomes, Todd, is this the role for pharmacists as we continue to start asking these questions of, you know what, we're already doing sort of patient intake in some cases. Should we be paid for doing this type of analysis for pharmaceutical companies to go, we're using this drug, we're seeing these effects, we want to be paid for the type of work we're doing for you? And no one's asked that question. I'm causing more costs, but it's a fair bit of work.
Well, we're excited about today. This is novel. This is new. We love new stuff. Shout out to Josh Parastani. Thank you so much,
Thank
Josh,
you.
our brother in crime out here in the pharma land. This was Legal Shark Week. This is not the last time that we're going to be doing this, Darshan. This is so much fun working with you in this live environment. By the way, shout out to our viewers. If you think of very specific issues, you can get as granular as you want. If you send those to Darshan or myself, you're very welcome to look it up. Just go send it to kulkarnilawfirm.com. Tell them it's to be one of the examples on the next Legal Shark Week, brought to you by Kulkarni Law Firm and the Pharmacy Podcast Network. Darshan, thank you so much for doing this with me. This was so much fun.
Thank you.
All right, we're out. We'll see you next time on Legal Shark Week.
Thank you, Todd.